Welcome to Crossroads. Folks, today is Inauguration Day for President Donald Trump, second administration now. And with it's going to come a big flurry of activity. I'm actually here in Washington, D.C. today. If you could see through this wall, the Capitol building is actually right behind this building. This is our office here. Now, we could actually have a pretty good view had plans not changed for today's events. They moved the inauguration indoors, allegedly because of the weather. And a lot of people, though, are still here to witness what's happening today. There's a lot of people lining up still to get on the Capitol grounds. The atmosphere is one of excitement. I know there were some reports of mass protests. I haven't seen any of that. I heard they were actually much smaller than was reported. Now, like the Epoch Times and our sister media, NTD, we're going to have full day coverage of all the events today, so check that out as well. If you want to see Trump dancing with the village people and so on. Now, I want to go into everything we could see happen in the first few days of Trump's second administration. And look, there's been a lot of talk today about everything he's planning to do day one, so let's jump into it. Now, first off, though, breaking news. Before Trump is officially inaugurated, Biden is still president of the United States. And in his final hours in office, just before the inauguration, President Joe Biden issued preemptive pardons to several individuals who were expected to face investigations under the Trump administration, will probably still be investigated. Epoch Times said this. It said President Joe Biden on January 20th issued preemptive pardons to Dr. Anthony Fauci, retired General Mark Milley, and people who served on the U.S. House of Representatives Committee investigating the Jan 6, 2021 breach of the U.S. Capitol building. It notes as well, Biden is also issuing preemptive pardons to law enforcement officers who testified to the House panel. And he said, quote, I believe in the rule of law, and I am optimistic that the strength of our legal institutions will ultimately prevail over politics, but these are exceptional circumstances, and I cannot in good conscience do nothing, Biden said in a statement, alleging that the individuals for whom he issued the pardons, quote, do not deserve to be the targets of unjustified and politically motivated prosecutions. Now, Republicans have shot back at that. Some of them suggest that this is very wrong of him to do. The type of preemptive pardons that they're getting, they're similar to what Biden issued to his son, Hunter Biden. We've actually never seen anything like this. The only thing we've seen even close to this would be the pardon that former President Richard Nixon was given to protect him from investigations after he left office. Remember, he gave the peace signs, got on the helicopter, and that was the end of it. At the same time, though, it's important, these pardons will not necessarily prevent investigations. In fact, it could actually make the investigations more effective. Republicans have suggested, at the very least, they plan on carrying out the investigations into the J6 committee, even if the former members get pardoned. It's also been suggested the pardons like this, it could make people unable to plead the fifth if they get asked to testify. Normally, they can ask you questions. You could say, I plead the fifth. I don't want to say things that will incriminate myself. You probably can't do that if there's no risk of incriminating yourself. And so in some ways, again, this could make the investigations maybe more effective, but people may not go to prison for it. Also, though, there could still be investigations that could lead to other things. The pardons make it so that during certain time frames, the way they did it, and we'll see the standstill, the way they did it, under certain time frames, any crime a person may have even potentially committed basically gets excused. That only applies to federal charges. Local charges, even foreign charges, and possible investigations that could lead to people maybe losing their pensions or getting stripped of titles. That could still be on the table. We'll have to see how that works. Now, that said, folks, aside from all of that, President Donald Trump is being sworn in as the 47th President of the United States today. This is the first day of the administration. Everything begins. And with this, the political landscape is not just changing in the United States. This is a global change. And we already have a general idea of what's going to happen, given that Trump has detailed what he has in store for a lot of this on his first day in office. Now, so far, the nominees for his cabinet, they're still going through. It's looking like Senator Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. He could be among the first to get confirmed, and Trump may have one person in his cabinet, at least, with his foot in the door when he starts. And on the policy front, Trump is coming in prepared to hit the ground running. Tom Homan, the border czar, he said as much as last night during an interview with American thought leaders at the Turning Point inauguration ball. Let me show you this. Watch.
Mexico's stepping up. Again, President Trump's already making a difference before he even gets in office. And Canada's coming to the table. President Trump's a game changer already. But wait till you see the executive orders come out tomorrow and see what happens then.
Now look, according to reports as well, Trump has 200 executive actions ready to go. That's about 50 executive orders and then 150 other actions. AP said this beforehand on January 10th. It's since been updated, but it said the President-elect Donald Trump has prepared 100 executive orders. That's now been changed, 200 executive actions. A lot bigger than what he initially said. Some of this could, for example, be going after the border, creating a border emergency, a national emergency around the border, meaning starting tomorrow, we could see a national emergency declared at the U.S.-Mexico border. He could rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. He's going to end some of the offshore wind farms, probably pull us out of the Paris Climate Accord. A lot of things like this on the table. Now let me show you, New York Post talked about what they have with the 200 executive actions. But look, remember, executive orders or executive actions, again, about 50 of these are going to be orders officially. Now, these are a pretty powerful tool that a president can wield, but they're also not that solid. It's possible we could see federal judges trying to block these in some areas around the United States. You might remember Trump's first term in office, he'd make an executive order, and then the news would come out that a Hawaiian judge or something like that blocked the order, and it meant it'd have to go through an entire legal process. Also, executive orders can usually be overturned pretty easily when a new president comes into office. So, 4 years they can last. After 4 years, it's kind of easy to overturn them normally. But these actually might help Trump jumpstart a lot of his policies. But the real solid stuff is not going to be the executive actions or orders, it's going to be legislation. Now, on that part, we are seeing some action as well. Trump was initially pushing for what he called one big powerful bill. And he basically wanted his early policies to get fast-tracked by having Congress vote on a reconciliation package. And his hopes for this, to have that single legislative package, it's making its way through congressional votes. The plan was he wanted to have it fast-tracked, get on his desk, get signed into law as soon as possible. But right now it's looking like one bill could be a bit too ambitious. Although the alternative is not a significant move away from that. The House Freedom Caucus, which is again, the House of Representatives members who are relatively more in support of Trump's agenda, they're now pushing for this agenda to roll it out with two big bills, not just one. They issued a statement on this on January 16th. Let me show you what they said. This is from the House Freedom Caucus. They said, quote, "We have put forward and shared with colleagues across the Republican conference a good faith proposal outlined below as a phase one of two, a two-step reconciliation strategy." And they said we would quickly fund border security, modernize the U.S. military, cut spending by reversing some of the worst Biden policies, right-size federal agencies and programs, and increase the debt ceiling for 2 years, not forever like Trump was saying he wants to do, while legitimately bending the spending curve down for the first time in decades. Now they note, our proposal is a Republican plan that we believe can reach 218 votes that would also allow us to keep the ball on the Republican side of the negotiating field for defense and non-defense appropriations while delivering wins and uniting this conference. Now, on that front, Trump has a few hurdles with this. The big one is going to be the debt ceiling. Now, basically, look, here's how it is. Trump wants to get rid of the debt ceiling. The United States has gone so deeply into debt, they've hit the limit on how much debt they can go into. And until recently, this problem has been solved by congressional votes to just keep raising the amount of debt we can possibly get into. It's kind of like if you are deeply in debt, and instead of paying off your debt, you get a new credit card, and then you keep maxing out your credit cards, and you get yourself out in debt by basically just continually getting new credit cards and maxing those out and increasing the amount of debt you're in. But now look, while talking about getting America out of debt, Trump is also calling for the entire elimination of the debt ceiling. And look, the big challenge is he needs funding to carry out his policies. If he can't raise the debt ceiling, he doesn't have the money he needs to do it. And now with his slight Republican supermajority in Congress and some support from Democrats, he basically needs to keep Republicans together on his orders and with his policies if this is going to pass. If even a few Republicans don't go along with what he plans, if Trump fails to win any support from Democrats, well, his policies are going to be hard to carry out. And so he does need to act with them, not against them. And it does seem he has that support right now. Now, as the Freedom Caucus notes, they do believe the current plan, 2 bills, they believe they have enough support to get that passed. And while Trump made it clear he wanted to get this done in 1 bill, he has also supported the 2-bill option. He's supporting it, right? He's on the table with this. Now, that said, folks, another action of the new administration that's expected for a long time is the likely pardon of the J6ers, the people who entered the Capitol building on January 6, 2020. And there are some mixed takes on how broad this is going to be. 2021. Now, in a recent interview with Fox, Vice President J.D. Vance said the pardons are likely, but they may not include everybody. Have a look at what he said. Watch this.
If you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law. And there are a lot of people, we think, in the wake of January the 6th who were prosecuted unfairly. We need to rectify that.
Now, look, on that point, it's also still possible Trump could just pardon everybody. Now, he's raised the issue that there may have been some problems in the way the cases were handled in the first place. He's been criticizing what he refers to as the weaponization of justice. And it is the case that some of the most serious charges were against groups like the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and look, their prosecutions have been used to frame the broader narratives on what took place that day. And on the whole conspiracy has been built around Trump's alleged role in that. Also with those cases, many people, including ourselves, we've noted that there are problems with the way some of those cases were handled, some gaps maybe that you would not normally see happen in criminal cases. And so with that said, it is possible Trump could just pardon basically everyone. Now, there's the other possibility that Trump may instead opt for some counter investigations along with pardons. Now, some have argued that pardons could make it more difficult for people to appeal their cases. And the more favorable path for some of them is going to be investigations of the security failures on Jan 6, the way each of the cases was handled and prosecuted, and look, overall, just maybe investigate potential wrongdoing that was done on the other side of the aisle. Something like fruit of the poisonous tree, right? Where if you carry out an investigation, there were problems with it, or maybe violations in use of force by the police, everything could potentially get thrown out, especially if there was entrapment involved, which is a real possible case they could find. Now, that could make some of the pardons unnecessary. This is where it gets complicated, though. A lot of the J6ers took plea deals. There's over like 1,600 of them. They're still arresting people, meaning Trump may even need to look into like preemptive pardons, similar to what Biden is doing for other individuals, for basically almost everybody who was present that day on January 6th in order to protect them from future charges. It's not clear what Trump is going to do, how he's going to do this. You do have a small number of people who did challenge the cases. Those people might want to actually go through and appeal the cases. We'll have to see how he actually chooses to handle this. Now look, also, there's another issue with illegal mass migration, and Trump has been discussing several very big policies on this. Among his planned one-day, first day, today or tomorrow policies is going to eliminate birthright citizenship. This is among the first things he's planning to do. That's the idea, look, that if you come here as an illegal immigrant, you have a kid, that kid automatically becomes a U.S. citizen, regardless of the legal status of the parents. You could come here as a tourist, You can illegally cross the border, go to an American hospital, give birth, no charges. You basically put them on the backs of American taxpayers or people using the hospital service, walk back to Mexico, and your kid, born for free in an American hospital, is now a U.S. citizen and can probably get benefits as well. Now, look, the challenge with ending this is that court precedents has established that birthright citizenship is kind of constitutional. There are some really important loopholes with this. Some suggest that you can't change unless you change the Constitution. Others are suggesting you would not really have to change the Constitution to get rid of it, including Trump. He's noting this. They're saying you just need to change the interpretation of the specific law. And their argument is that birthright citizenship does not apply to people whose parents entered the U.S. illegally, people who are here just as tourists and so on, people who are violating the law and then having a kid here. They're arguing that it should not be interpreted as encompassing those people, which would be a very large number of the cases. Now, the Heritage Foundation has been backing up on Trump with this, and they've also been releasing some of their own analysis on how the legal case for Trump could actually work. Have a look at this.
Universal birthright citizenship is actually a misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment. It was ratified in 1868, shortly after the Civil War, to specifically extend citizenship to freed slaves and their children. But the 14th Amendment does not say that all people born in the United States are citizens. It says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. That second critical conditional phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, is conveniently ignored or misinterpreted by advocates of birthright citizenship. It was written to help distinguish between people like the children of former slaves, who were unfairly denied citizenship, and the children of diplomats or other people who were in the country but owed their citizenship to other countries. Many claim that anyone present in the United States has subjected him or herself to the jurisdiction of the United States. But Senator Lyman Trumbull, a key figure in the adoption of the 14th Amendment, said that subject to the jurisdiction meant not owing allegiance to any other country. He's referring to the difference between partial territorial jurisdiction, which subjects all foreigners who enter the United States to the jurisdiction of our laws, and complete political jurisdiction, which requires allegiance to the United States government as well.
Now look, they go on to give some additional analysis on their case. For example, they note, look, if someone comes to the United States as a tourist and they commit a crime, well, they could still get prosecuted, right? The U.S. law does encompass it on that. But if America went to war and then issued a draft, the tourist would not be subject to a military draft. They would also not be subject to other requirements for citizens here, like having to go to jury duty or anything like that. And they note that this is kind of the legal gray area for this, right? The difference of being kind of recognized as part of the U.S. system and not. It also notes one of the key cases in all of this, right? When people talk about birthright citizenship being affirmed by the Supreme Court, the main case that's used these days to defend the legality of birthright citizenship for the children of illegal immigrants, they cite a 1898 case. This was when the U.S. Supreme Court determined that a man named Wong Kim Ark was a U.S. citizen because he was born in this country, even though his parents were also citizens under the then Chinese emperor. But the technicality with that 1800s case, his parents were not illegal immigrants. His parents were not tourists or anything like that. His parents were lawful U.S. permanent residents, meaning technically they were under the jurisdiction of U.S. law and the U.S. system. And so look, the case that Trump has on birthright citizenship, it will very likely be on these interpretations. And if day one Trump does in fact do what he says he'll do and he issues an executive order ending birthright citizenship, here's what's probably going to happen. He will immediately get challenged on this by maybe a federal judge. That will start a legal case, and that legal case will go to the Supreme Court, very likely. Now look, also on this, folks, there's the issue of mass deportations. And it seems this is also still very much on the table and still a day one policy as well. In fact, they're saying Trump is probably going to issue an executive order by the end of today or tomorrow declaring a national emergency on the border. Now, Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, he reaffirmed this just the other day. This is him talking with Fox News' Jesse Waters on January 17th. Have a look.
Am I blowing your cover when I announce that there's going to be a big raid in Chicago on Tuesday? Or do you want people to know? Maybe they can self-deport.
There's going to be a big raid all across the country. Chicago is just one of many places. We got 24 field officers across the country. On Tuesday, you're going to expect ICE. ICE is finally going to go out and do their job. We're going to take the handcuffs off ICE and let them go arrest criminal aliens. That's what's going to happen.
Now, look, this is important. There have been some various reports going around. The mass deportations are going to start in Chicago and in Illinois overall. Tom Homan has talked about this a bit before, mainly because of reports of illegal gangs like the Tren de Aragua Venezuelan gang. They were raiding apartments in Aurora. But what he's saying here is it will not just be in one part of the country. It's not just going to be in Chicago, right? He's saying the deportations will be across the United States. He's saying ICE, Immigration Enforcement, they're already preparing for these operations. And look, although on that point he does affirm something important, which is the initial wave of mass deportations does appear to be focused on criminal aliens. Those are illegal aliens who have committed other crimes, not just of entering the country illegally. And also the Lake and Riley Act now probably having enough votes in Congress, including with Democrats. It's possible this could actually happen without too much challenge, meaning that even Congress is behind this as it moves forward. Now, there were also some reports saying that Tom Homan was maybe stalling this, that maybe plans will have to change. This is based on the fact that, again, the mainstream media, they had a few reports claiming that they had whistleblowers saying that Tom Homan was going to focus on Chicago. He actually said that himself, that they would focus first on Illinois. So this wasn't like a real leak. They're making it sound like a leak. Again, he was talking to Jesse Waters in that video about it. It wasn't some big secret. And so the big corporate media, they're making it sound like they had this big, secret whistleblower come out. It was already being discussed. And he made it clear that's not really the real story here. This is a nationwide policy, although Illinois probably will be more of a focus. Now look, folks, there are also different takes on how this could look. There have been rumors that Trump may declare martial law to help these operations. And if that happens, we could see the U.S. military get deployed as well. Now, other countries are also preparing for welcoming back their citizens or not. Venezuela, for example, they've said they will not be taking people back. They're saying, let's see you try to stop us, basically. Honduras is threatening to close U.S. military bases if the United States deports illegal immigrants from Honduras. Mexico, they're declaring a state of emergency in parts of the country as they prepare to receive probably millions of people. And look, overall, we can expect wall-to-wall news coverage on these operations as they start. And another big issue coming up for the Trump administration is TikTok. And a lot has been happening with that over the weekend in particular. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Folks, the issue over TikTok has actually gotten even bigger. The U.S. Supreme Court has determined that the move to either ban TikTok or to have its Chinese parent company ByteDance sell off the U.S. operations is legal. It is not a violation of the First Amendment, free speech, right? Basically, the move was passed by Congress. It was signed into law by now soon-to-be former President Biden, and it was affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court. The court determined this is not an issue of free speech. They're saying it's a national security issue. They actually emphasized and found, actually, TikTok is being deeply controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, even though they were saying that was not the case initially. It turns out it is the case. The CCP is using TikTok as one of its tools for its own purposes. They're manipulating things, and TikTok is being used as that. Now, on that point, given that this SCOTUS ruling happened on Friday, just a few days before Trump's inauguration, the ban technically went through Sunday, one day before the inauguration for Trump. President Biden has been saying he would not enforce it, so instead, that's leaving it up to Donald Trump. And then yesterday, the day the deadline hit, and TikTok indeed went dark for a very short while as the ban went into effect, Trump wrote on Truth Social signaling that he is going to sign an executive order postponing the federal ban on TikTok. And here's what he wrote. He said this, Truth Social. He said, "I'm asking companies not to let TikTok stay dark. I will issue an executive order on Monday to extend the period of time before the law's prohibitions take effect so that we can make a deal to protect our national security." He said the order will also confirm that there will be no liability for any company that helped keep TikTok from going dark before my order. Now, as some context on this, the divest or ban law, it does allow the president to offer a 90-day extension of the ban. But if there is a significant process toward divestiture, that's the only case they could do it in. And Trump is also suggesting that he wants the U.S. to have a 50% stake in a joint venture to own TikTok. Though, again, it seems more like it's an idea he's suggesting than something that's concrete at the moment. We'll have to see how this pans out. The CCP does not seem interested in letting go of TikTok in particular. But after Trump posted the message on Truth Social, before any executive order was signed, and even before the inauguration, TikTok announced it had restored access in the United States on Sunday afternoon. And some are also suggesting that companies helping with that could face criminal charges for that, or maybe some litigation. Now, look, regardless of what will happen after Trump is inaugurated, this was a very brazen move from TikTok. They're openly disobeying a law that the Supreme Court just upheld, that the President of the United States signed, that Congress passed, and before Trump came into office, meaning they could be they are violating the law. The question is whether they're going to be held to that. Now, look, we're going to have to see what Donald Trump does legally under the divest or ban law. He's only able to delay the inevitable by giving TikTok a 90-day extension on being banned, right? About 3 months. Under the law, SCOTUS just upheld TikTok must find a new owner. It cannot stay under the CCP's ByteDance. And we'll also have to see what happens once Trump gets his briefing on what's been going on behind the scenes with TikTok, because we could assume that maybe he just hasn't gotten the briefings everyone else has been getting because he was not yet president. And I want to reiterate the national security concerns with TikTok. Now, when it comes, of course, to the Supreme Court, they actually found that a lot of information on TikTok claims that they were not altering information, claims information was not being sent to China, claims that the CCP had no hand in it, all this. It turned out that was not the case. The Chinese Communist Party has huge influence over TikTok. Chinese law allows them to view data regardless of what the companies want, meaning that a lot of what we were told about TikTok, it's safe, all this stuff's a bunch of rumors, a lot of what we were told was fake. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0. Every justice, no matter where they stand on the political aisle, voted against TikTok. And again, basically said this is a national security issue, not a free speech issue. Now, a lot of people are turning this into a free speech conversation. It's not. The Supreme Court made this very clear. This is about U.S. national security. And while TikTok now is able to operate possibly for 90 days now, if Trump says he's going to do what he said, that also puts a big magnifying glass over their operations during this time. Everything they say or do right now could be very crucial on whether they stay or go. And remember also, TikTok is in the pocket of the CCP to a large extent, as has now been determined. Now look, with this also, we could see peace deals get finalized between Russia and Ukraine, as well as between Hamas and Israel. Some of this is already happening. Leading up to Trump's inauguration today, Trump had threatened a massive response to the terror groups in the war against Israel, saying that he was going to respond massively unless they came to an agreement. And what happened? Well, almost immediately, right after Trump made those threats against the terrorist organizations, Hamas and Israel agreed on a deal to have the hostages released and possibly bring an end to this war. The deal they signed was one that they had already had on the table. The Biden administration did have some role in penning that, although both are kind of vying for who was responsible for the peace deal. Both take credit for it. You could say that the actual deal itself was something that was already in place. Trump definitely pushed it over the finish line by making the threats of a very strong U.S. response. Now, look, we're going to see if this stands, though. A lot of critics have suggested it's not fully in the interests of Israel either. Remember, Israel was saying they will not sign any deal that allows Hamas to maintain any type of control in Gaza. Hamas has been celebrating this as a kind of victory. They did release the hostages. Israel was also saying they would end the war if the hostages were released. And so it's kind of one of those things where nobody's fully happy, but both sides are getting some of what they wanted. Now look, the peace deals likely will not end there though. And the war between Russia and Ukraine, well, that's the next big one. Trump was saying before that he wants to end the war between Russia and Ukraine within the first 24 hours of taking office. Others have countered that, saying that's impossible. They're saying it's going to take at least like 100 days, and that's going to be more likely. We'll see if Trump can pull it off. He has said he wants this. Now, on this, Russian President Vladimir Putin, he's saying he is willing to meet with Trump on a peace deal. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, he's shown interest in negotiating this deal as well. The CCP is trying to puppeteer this deal. We'll see if they can have any role in this or if Trump's going to push him out. Again, all of this is right now on the table. Also, folks, a few other big changes. Even before Trump gets back into office, net neutrality came to an end. It's out. It is done. It's over, at least for the next 4 years. And with it, the Obama-era policy to extend federal control over online delivery came to a close. This was from a couple weeks ago. Forbes said this. It said the Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals struck down the Federal Communication Commission, that's FCC, net neutrality rule that regulates internet broadband services, and that was on January 2nd. They said if not overturned, this holding will have major implications, not just for the provision of those services, but also for the intrusive regulatory schemes as well. Basically, this could overturn a lot of federal control over the internet. And it's the decision may be the harbinger of efforts by the incoming Trump administration to rein in the regulatory state. The regulatory state being a reference, of course, to the rule by decree. The idea that different organizations, different agencies like the FCC or the DOE or whatever else, that they can create regulations that bypass the legislative process. And when many people talk about the deep state or whatever you want to call it, they talk about the regulatory state. Basically, here's how it works. In the United States, traditionally, in the country, the way it was formed, if you want to pass a law, here's how it happens. The people of the United States elect representatives to go and represent them in the democratic process. A republic is representative democracy. We have representatives who go on our behalf and vote on things. Now, the representatives go and vote in the House of Congress on different legislation. Legislation passes. Finally, that goes to the President of the United States, chosen by the American people. And if the President decides to pass it, it becomes a law. And then if that law is deemed to be unconstitutional, it can get overturned by the Supreme Court. And so there's a few different areas of checks and balances. And even then, if a sheriff does not deem it as being constitutional, even a sheriff within any state of the country can just choose to not enforce it. America has a lot of checks and balances to prevent unconstitutional law. The regulatory state gets around this because what has happened is this. Rather than go through the legislative process, different government agencies through kind of the growing federal system, federal agencies can bypass that entire process by just creating rules. They call this the regulatory state, right? Where they make these different rules and these act kind of like laws, but you can't challenge them under the normal systems, and it's much more difficult for you to push back against this. The amount of regulations is massive, and a lot of government agencies continue to expand in ways that are outside the normal control of the government. Trump has been suggesting he wants to rein that in. The new DOGE Department of Government Efficiency, is talking about reining that in as well. And what has happened now with the FCC and net neutrality also represents one of the first signs of the reining in of the regulatory state. Now, also on the FCC plan, already action to, court overturning, I should say, to get rid of the net neutrality rules. This will effectively lift a lot of the federal restrictions and laws on broadband internet providers. But as an extension to that, could also end several other government policies for the internet. This will likely be the beginning of this, very far from the end, of policies on the internet and trying to maybe rein in censorship or other things like this. And on that note as well, Trump's also talking about this. Trump and his FCC chair appointee, does not need to be affirmed by Congress, just appoints him. They've talked about ending what they call the censorship cartel. And this will likely include eliminating the government bodies that were working on government censorship, right? Censoring free speech, censoring news, censoring the internet, the whole 9 yards. And it will also include possible lawsuits and maybe even antitrust charges against the very many individuals and the very many companies that were involved with this. And that's going to be pretty big. The censorship cartel, as they're referring to it, it's not limited to just government agencies, especially under the Department of Homeland Security, for example, and others. This also includes social media censorship. It includes these so-called fact checkers at many big organizations. It includes activist organizations. It includes businesses and companies that dictate advertising through ad networks and then can strategically deny ads to their competitors. It includes a good chunk of the big corporate news outlets also involved with this, ironically censoring many of their own competitors, which may violate the law. And it also includes many foreign governments, different countries that are pushing censorship in the United States. In fact, Europe right now, they're even ordering X and Elon Musk to open up all their systems because they're saying that free speech on X may violate European law, is one example of this. Now look, if this entire censorship cartel, this global and very big business system comes to an end, we can also expect a major shakeup on the information landscape, including what may be a further collapse of many legacy news outlets. A lot of them right now are not doing so well. A lot of them could go out of business. Some of them may be forced to sell off because they can't afford their operations. Some are trying to save themselves by trying to become more neutral. We'll see how that actually works. And of course, look, with all this going on, it could also be the case that if they have to play on a level playing field, they may not be able to compete anymore. Now, there's a lot going on right now, folks. Ton going on in the country. Again, I'm in Washington, D.C. right now. If you could see through this wall, you'd actually see the Capitol building. I'll be going deeper into the other policies we can expect. There's too much to talk about in just one episode. And we will be watching everything unfolds and covering it all as we move forward. And that's let's jump into some questions. Folks, hit the like button, leave a comment, and let's talk. Let's see here. All right. First question from Rhonda. You're saying, by pardoning them, it has labeled them as guilty forever. Yeah, so you're talking about President Biden pardoning the J6 committee, the people who testified, Mark Milley, former general, pardoning Anthony Fauci. For a lot of people, it's true, actually. For a lot of people, the pardons actually kind of affirm their guilt in terms of perception, but it also depends on which side of the political aisle you're on. A lot of Democrats, if you read their media, they're saying this is basically shielding them from investigations, and they're saying, oh, Trump wants to have like retribution politics and so on. Now, it's not clear whether it's just the corporate news machine saying that, or if people actually believe that. If you were to look at polling data, there are still plenty of Democrats who believe there were problems with the way some of the J6 cases were handled. There were still a lot of people who maybe did not agree with Mark Milley saying that he was going to warn, telling, again, his Chinese, people in China, that he was going to warn them if Trump was going to like counter them, which some have suggested could be a pretty major criminal charge if you were to face justice for that. We do know that the House of Representatives, Republicans have recommended criminal charges against some members of the J6 committee, like Liz Cheney. She's now pardoned. Republicans are pushing for charges against her. What I think is going to very likely happen is that despite the pardons, they will probably still move forward with the investigations. And so the investigations are going to happen, and here's what I think is going to happen. They will investigate, they will probably make their cases. Those cases will not result in federal criminal charges, but they could result in people getting stripped of their positions, stripped of their pensions, probably losing security clearances. It will tarnish their names, very likely. It may prosecute people who were involved, not the leading people, but all the other people. And also it could make them so they can't plead the fifth. It could deeply destroy their reputations and maybe their financial well-being. That is a very likely possibility despite these pardons. And depending on the weight of what we actually see, there may still be other forms of charges. The pardons just make it so they can't face federal criminal charges. We'll see how this goes. The other possibility is we've never seen pardons like this where people are preemptively pardoned for any potential criminal charges. Normally, if you pardon somebody, it's that they were charged with something, they were already prosecuted, and they're pardoned for something like that. You can't really pardon somebody who's never been charged. That was kind of the way it used to be understood. The only exception to that, the only historical precedence to that, would be Richard Nixon, when he was pardoned, again, for anything that might have happened during the Watergate scandal and anything of that sort. Biden extended that much further when he pardoned his son, Hunter Biden, for a very large swath of time, going back to like the Burisma deal and things like that, which make it so that he can't really face criminal charges for any potential investigations. Biden now extending that to a lot of other people. We'll see if he overplayed his hand with this, because there's also a chance that there could be challenges maybe at the Supreme Court on presidential pardons and the legalities of how broad they can be. We could get some answers in that as well. So not everything is off the table. But I would assume that for the Supreme Court to take this up, if they ever want to challenge it, will also determine what comes about in the very likely investigations. Because if it turns out that people falsified evidence to have Americans falsely prosecuted for January 6th, if it turns out that an individual was working with China to create viruses, or if it turns out that an individual may have committed treason cooperating with China to undermine the United States, charges that massive, people would probably want to see criminal charges even with a pardon. And so you could potentially see that going to the Supreme Court and looking to overturn those. But again, this is only if you go by the very extreme extent of what some people believe may have taken place. And I do think we will see investigations into that regardless of any of this. So get ready for it. Ashley from California, you're saying, what do these preemptive pardons cover? Is it a broad pardon for anything or just for what he thinks they'll be investigated for? We're not being given full details yet. As of right now, all we're really getting is these are preemptive pardons. And, you know, with these individuals, we do have a general sense of what they could be investigated for. It's very likely it's going to be pardons for within certain time frames, because that's what Biden used for Hunter Biden. If he gives very limited preemptive pardons, that's not going to cover them for anything else, and so not really serve their interests in protecting them from investigations and anything that may come up through investigations. Now remember, people have a general idea of the types of, you know, technical charges people might face. When you actually get into litigation, when you actually get into really going after someone criminally, usually the charges people get are not what you would normally expect. Like Al Capone, what he got charged with, like, you know, tax violations. He wasn't getting charged for being a mob boss. And in that same vein, people who may have committed what we would regard as very serious crimes may not get charged on those. They might get charged on some, you know, something else entirely that comes up through the investigative process. So it'll probably be charges to protect them from anything like that, so within time frames. But we'll see. Let's see. Ash Salam, you're saying, say China has even a speck of data on me. What's the threat? And it's proven all U.S. systems are hackable. Well, so you're talking, I believe, about TikTok and the idea of the Chinese Communist Party basically gaining access to your data. Okay, sir, there's a few things with this. The issue with TikTok and the issue with Chinese access to information and the platform like that is not limited to just data theft. On the front of data, this is the concern. If you understand the way that Chinese cyber attacks work and they're going after information, what are they going after? They're going after college professors. They're going after people who may get future careers in things that may be of interest to the CCP. They're going after researchers. They're going after business people. They're going after politicians. They're going after people in our military. They're going after intelligence on the United States. And if you understand the way that intelligence gathering works, it's not just like spy stuff. Even basic procedures, even basic laws, all of that is actually valuable to inform a foreign adversary of the thinking of another country. So the perspectives of the American people, how they view policies, the way that people may perceive Chinese actions, all of this would actually fall in the realm of intelligence gathering. The Chinese Communist Party would understand the thinking of they would want to know the thinking of the American people because they want to know how to manipulate Americans for propaganda purposes. The Chinese Communist Party would want to know what you look at, what you browse, what issues you're interested in, the loopholes they could manipulate to propagandize the American people. And so, aside from data theft, aside from national security issues directly, aside from intellectual property theft, aside from data access, like breaching individual companies, even if you're like a low-level IT guy at a company, you're a major target because they can use a breach of you to access the entire company. All of that stuff is of interest to them, but also even individual users who may not feel that they pose any part of interest, you are interesting to them because every drop of data you give them informs them how to do propaganda operations against the United States. Every drop of analytics, everything that you search for on the internet, every video you watch on TikTok Reels, the CCP would be interested in all of that. They want to know the thinking of the American people because they want to know how to manipulate the American people. And so it informs them of how to tailor their propaganda, how to tailor things that could harm the fabric of this country. And also, with TikTok, the concern is not just data access. The concern is not just data privacy or access to your device and stuff like that. The concern is also that they're intentionally feeding harmful content. For example, kids using TikTok, and almost immediately they're getting content in promoting self-harm, promoting suicide, telling them to, do things that will harm their lives. And if you understand the CCP may have a hand in manipulating the algorithms that would intentionally feed harmful content to American kids, that's serious. You know what I mean? And if you get kids, and they're on TikTok and they get videos telling them how to cut themselves, and you understand the CCP has a hand in feeding them those algorithms, that's a big deal. And so even people who don't believe that they have, that what they're doing is of interest to the CCP, everything is very much of interest to the CCP. Now, the other side of this, some people, and I would say this as well, some people argue, well, the CCP gets that data anyways because they buy it from other big tech companies, right? Big tech companies sell their data to China's Baidu, right? Like their stolen version of Google, basically. And if Baidu gets it, if Baidu gets it because of the Chinese data laws, hypothetically the CCP can get it too under those exact same laws. I would say the same thing, actually. I would actually say that that big tech companies overall, no matter what they are, TikTok, Apple, Facebook, they should not be allowed to sell American data to Chinese companies. That no company should be allowed to sell this type of analytics to the Chinese Communist Party or any company by extension of that. I would argue that Tencent poses just as much of a threat as TikTok does. I would argue that Reddit and allowing the Chinese companies to invest in Reddit presents just as much of a problem and just as much of a threat as TikTok does. I would argue that allowing other companies in other countries that work very closely with the CCP or have investment in their companies, where it's again investment but two steps removed, where the CCP or a Chinese company invests in one company and that company then invests in these companies or buys data, and the CCP gets it by extension. I'd say that is just as much of a problem. And so what I've been arguing is the TikTok ban is a good start. I hope it gets carried out. Although I do think that if they find a way to remove the CCP from the entire picture and they can turn TikTok into a normal, healthy social media, as healthy as social media can be, fine. But I also think TikTok is the tip of the iceberg. I think that this needs to be a broader issue, and I do believe that if the TikTok ban does go through, or at the very least the divestment plan goes through, that we will see similar actions carried out against other companies, because the problems now being raised with TikTok are not limited to TikTok. This is a much broader issue, a significantly broader issue that desperately needs to be addressed. All right, I'd say Google, YouTube, all these things have problems like this that really, really need to be addressed, personally. Judy Yakim, you're saying, doesn't that preemptive pardon inhibit other people's rights to get justice? Like saying, oh, sorry, the person who caused your husband's death cannot be persecuted or prosecuted because of preemptive pardons. That's true. That is the argument against pardons in general. For example, Joe Biden also, he did not give full pardons to, but Biden commuted the sentences of a lot of people who were on death row. And those cases were exactly like that. These were people who were murderers. These were child killers, people who murdered children, just had their sentences commuted by President Biden, right? And he didn't let them off the hook. They're not going to be walking on the street tomorrow, but they're not on death row anymore, right? They're not going to be executed for their crimes. And if you understand that there's a mother and a father whose little girl was murdered by somebody in cold blood, and that guy is not going to face, justice anymore, because again, in this country, unfortunately, this is deemed a political issue. You'd imagine what they're going through. You can imagine the slap in the face that represents when you find out that the person who you fought for justice against, the person you cried tears watching them finally face justice, they're not going to face justice anymore. That is one of the issues with presidential pardons in general. there were people given pardons who were part of the Weather Underground, who carried out terrorist attacks, who bombed the Capitol building, who killed police, right? Not under Biden, but under previous administrations. You know what I mean? You've seen people like that pardoned. They're talking about, letting people off the hook who were even part of the Twin Towers attacks, right? September 11th attacks. And so it's the way that pardons work. I do have my problems with this. The big problem we have in the U.S. is that a lot of this is political. A lot of it is political. It's not just crime, it's politics. And also, I would say this has to do with the nature of justice in itself. That justice is you raised, Judith, right? Justice is not just about punishment. Justice is also about justice for the victims. And the victims don't just include the immediate victims. Victims include the loved ones of the victims as well, right? If your father or your child or someone you love is murdered, you are going to be affected by it just as much as the person who was directly harmed. And so that, justice is supposed to address that as well as prevent things like this, because usually the threat of consequence is what may deter people from doing the same thing, right? And if people say, oh, there's no threat of consequence, might as well do it, that affects the integrity of, I'd say, the entire country at that point. Now, Trump is going to get a lot of pressure too. If Trump does pardon the J6ers, he's going to get pressure from that too, although I do think that's going to be accompanied with counter-investigations, and I believe those counter-investigations will very likely clear a lot of people's names. As someone who has personally investigated a lot of what actually took place on January 6th, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I can tell you without being partisan, that a lot of the information was falsely represented. And I believe a lot of people will have their names cleared as the investigations go forward. So get ready for that too. Paul Navante, you're saying, what real force do executive orders have? So we're saying that Trump, he's going to be issuing day one, so we could see either by the end of the day today or tomorrow. Trump is saying day one, 200 executive actions. Among those are around 50 executive orders, although we'll see at the end of the day what that actually means. Now, what did they actually do? Executive orders are meant as a kind of emergency bypass of the legislative process. If the President of the United States deems that a policy is serious enough and needed enough that we don't have time to go through Congress and the normal legislative process, the President of the United States can issue an executive order to fast track that process. That means that day one, an action can be taken. That does not remove the checks and balances of the United States. It does not mean that a president can do things that are unconstitutional. For example, if a president came in and said, executive action, all guns are banned, and every American has to put tape over their mouths for the next 2 years. You know what I mean? It's an executive action. It would be immediately blocked by federal judges, and it would go through the Supreme Court, and the executive order would be temporarily, moot until it goes to the Supreme Court. And the problem they have with that is if they do a hasty executive order and it goes to the Supreme Court and it's serious enough where it gets fast-tracked to that, it risks having the Supreme Court create an opinion that will change the law of the land. And if they do that, it may go against the interests of what the individual who did it in the first place wanted. With Trump in particular, I believe the reason he's doing these executive orders is because he wants to fast-track his agenda, and he believes that his agenda will be met very quickly by legislative action, right? The plan for the one big bill or the two big bills. And so we're going to see that. And I also believe, I actually believe that Trump wants to have some executive orders because he wants to have them go to the Supreme Court. For example, overturning, for example, birthright citizenship. I think Trump understands that will almost without a doubt get immediately blocked by a federal judge. And once it gets blocked, it'll be put on hold. Birthright citizenship still stands. But what will happen is that because it almost will, without a doubt, be blocked, it will go to the Supreme Court. And what he's doing by doing this is making it so the Supreme Court has to have a reevaluation and a new judgment on the legalities of the issue. And so I believe that he's also doing some of that intentionally because he wants the Supreme Court to act and create new interpretations of laws. That's what I think he's doing with this. All right, folks, that said, stick around. We're going to be doing all-day broadcasts today. The inauguration is happening right now as we speak, all the events. We're doing live broadcasts all day long. Again, I'm in Washington, D.C. If you could see through this wall, you would actually see the Capitol building behind me. This is our Washington office. Melania Trump has just appeared. We will show it here on our channel, so don't go anywhere. Stick around. Stay here. I'm going to jump off for now, folks, but keep watching for Trump's inauguration, and I will see you also tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So enjoy the broadcast. Thank you so much for being here. And as always, take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, performing "O America," please welcome the Armed Forces Chorus and America's tenor, Christopher D. Macchio.
America, you're calling. I can hear you calling me. You are calling me to pay true to thee, true to thee. I will be. Oh, America, no weeping, let there be no wounded heart. I will keep you in my keeping till there'll be from your mountains grand and north of this land, you are beautiful to me. Oh, America, you're calling. I can hear you calling me. You are calling me to pay true to thee, true to thee. Oh, I will be. And we will be as America, you're calling. I will
the Honorable Jackie Barber, the Clerk of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Kevin F. McCumber, Mr. John Bessler, Mrs. Kelly Johnson, Mrs. Iris Weinschall Schumer, and Mrs. Jennifer Scalise. Ladies and gentlemen, escorting the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States, Ranking Member of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Deb Fischer, House Democratic Leader, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, and Senate Majority Secretary, the Honorable Robert Duncan. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, the Honorable Joseph R. Biden Jr., and Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Kamala Devi Harris. Ladies and gentlemen, escorting the Vice President-elect, the Executive Director for the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Mr. Michael Wagner, Senate Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms and Doorkeeper, Jason Bell, and House Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms, Mr. Sean Keating. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President-elect of the United States, the Honorable J.D. Vance. Ladies and gentlemen, escorting the President-elect, the Staff Director for the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, Elizabeth Farah, House Sergeant-at-Arms, the Honorable William P. McFarland, Senate Sergeant-at-Arms and Doorkeeper, the Honorable Jennifer A. Hemingway, Senate Majority Leader, the Honorable John Thune, and the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, House Democratic Leader, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, House Majority Leader, the Honorable Steve Scalise, Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson, Senate Democratic Leader, the Honorable Charles E. Schumer, Ranking Member of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Deb Fischer, and Chairwoman of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Amy Klobuchar. Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, the Honorable Donald John Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Please welcome the Chairwoman of the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies, the Honorable Amy Klobuchar.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 60th presidential inauguration. Today, President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance will take their oaths of office, and we will witness the peaceful transfer of power at the heart of our democracy. For the past year, I've chaired the Inaugural Ceremony Committee, which includes the leadership of Congress from both parties. We thank the committee and Capitol staff and law enforcement who worked so hard over the last year, and especially the last 3 days. You've done a beautiful job, and you have shown grace under pressure. Our theme this year is our enduring democracy. The presence of so many presidents and vice presidents here today is truly a testament to that endurance. We welcome President Biden and Dr. Biden. We welcome Vice President Harris and Doug Emhoff, President Obama, President Clinton and Secretary Clinton, President Bush and Laura Bush, Vice President Pence, Vice President Quayle and Marilyn Quayle. The justices of the United States Supreme Court are with us, all 9 of them I counted, and of course, the Trump and Vance families. This ceremony marks, in other countries, it might be in a presidential palace or a gilded executive office building. Here it is traditionally held at the Capitol, the People's House. It is a fitting reminder of the system of checks and balances that is the very foundation of our government, 3 equal branches of government. That is how, for nearly 250 years, our great American experiment, grounded in the rule of law, has endured. So, as we inaugurate a new president and vice president, let us remember that the power of those in this room comes from the people. The construction workers who build our country, the teachers and healthcare workers who nurture us, the troops defending our freedoms, and yes, the firefighters in Los Angeles putting themselves on the line for us. Our democracy's strength and grit must match theirs. May God bless our nation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Endurance through the years is the ultimate test. To persevere through time is the truest measure of an idea, an institution, and a nation. Our founders wrote the Constitution so that America could withstand all the twists and turns of time. They wrote it to guide us and to preserve forever our right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But as much as the truths and principles enshrined in our Constitution remain the same, our democracy promises the American people the power to change, to chart their own destiny. That's the beauty. That is the importance of democracy. It allows the endurance, the permanence of a nation through change. It allows nations like our United States both to avoid the obstacles and to seize the opportunities God has placed before us, all while staying true to our founding principles. Today is our country's 60th inauguration ceremony. Like all the others before it, it is a celebration of our right to set our uniquely American course. The past several years have been trying at times for many, many Americans, and also for the nations of the free world that we humbly strive to lead. In November, Americans chose again to steer this nation towards greatness, the secure, safe, and prosperous future that our founders envisioned for all of us. And today, we celebrate not only their decision to do so, but also the simple right and wisdom of a free people to make their own choice so that their nation might endure. And now, allow me to welcome Archbishop Timothy Dolan and Reverend Franklin Graham, who will deliver our invocation. Please rise.
Claim that in God we trust. Gather indeed this inauguration day to pray For our President Donald J. Trump, his family, his advisors, his cabinet, his aspirations, his vice president. For the Lord's blessings upon Joseph Biden. For our men and women in uniform. For each other whose hopes are stoked this new year, this inauguration day. We cannot err in relying upon that prayer from the Bible, upon which our president will soon place his hand in oath, as we make our own the supplications of King Solomon for wisdom as he began his governance.
America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. Let me use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together, we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation. And right now, our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together, they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.